So, what are some of the mistakes that people make um, during their visa interview? What are the mistakes? Sometimes people don't take this very seriously because they feel like, oh, it doesn't matter. I don't have to prepare for my visa interview because it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. Yes, it does matter because by the time you walk down to that embassy and then your visa is denied, and then you go through that trauma, then you will understand that it's very important to prepare ahead of time um, before going for um, visa interview. All right, so I'm gonna concentrate on so many points, and there may be about 4 or 8. So I'm gonna focus on so many points. So listen very well. Top mistakes, most mistakes that people make that can affect their visa uh, functioning, that can affect um, the success of their visa interview. One of them is nervousness. You know, you may think this is not important. The first time you walk up to that counter, the kind of tension that will grab you, and you start struggling to, oh, you think, oh, you can handle this, but once you get to that counter and you start having this nervous breakdown, and you start, getting to tabla rasa, what they call like um, getting to tabla rasa, what they call like empty slate. Like when your memory starts failing you, that's when you understand. So, how do you avoid this? Start preparing ahead of time. Prep with any kind of prep with people who understand better, so that you are not just memorizing the question, but you are also trying to um, provide yourself with the confidence that you need, the necessary confidence that you need. Confidence is what you need. And before you go for an interview, talk to people who have been there. Talk to people who have been there, not people who are still practicing. And sometimes people make the mistakes of prepping with people who are ignorant, people who think they know but they don't actually know, and then they create more confusion for yourself. So it's very encouraging to avoid nervousness, drink a lot of water, and sleep well before your interview. Another one is providing incomplete documentation. When you go to the interview and then your VO will ask you a question and then you start talking about nonsense, you start mentioning things you don't understand. So these are some of the things that can make you fail interviews, because you are not only going to be struggling to um, uh, to provide information to your VO, but you don't have the information. So you are battling with two things. One is that you don't have the information. Two, you don't have it completely, or you are trying to convince your VO and then you don't have complete documentation. When they say, okay, bring this one, even from the gate, from the entrance. So those security men will first of all check you to ascertain you have the required document. But there are also important documents that you need to have. Nobody needs to tell you about that one, like having your bank statements, having your F1, I-20, having uh, every documentation that can help to prove your point, including uh, just think about anything, your maybe certificates or whatever, because you don't know where questions are going to come. So incomplete documentation can affect your interview and also void your possibility of getting chances. Then another one is communication. So the problem in the world is usually communication. People saying one thing and meaning another thing. For instance, when you go for interview, and people who make this kind of mistake, most Nigerians make that mistake. You you go for an interview and they ask you, what are you doing? And you say you are doing business. So for your interviewer, except maybe some of them who live in Nigeria who may understand, but that's called a blanket statement. You can't use a blanket statement to win an argument. You are doing business. So for your interviewer, what kind of business is this? Like, you don't put up that kind of business. If you are into buying and selling, as most of our people call it business, there are better ways to present your case. Go straight to the point. If you're into importation, talk about it. If you're into what again? If you're into if you have maybe like boutique, or if you have maybe like how do I what other ways? If you're into education, just say it. If you're into if you're a teller, talk about it. Go straight to the point. Don't use blanket statement. You are into buying and selling. For instance, if you have a clothing store, just mention it. You have a clothing store, you have a clothing line, all those things. Don't say you are doing business. So communication can misconstrue your point. Lack of uh, the right use of right words can miscommunicate your intention. Then another one is inconsistent information. Then you mention in the document that you are doing this, and then during the interview, you just talk about something else. So that also will tell your interviewer that you actually don't know what you're doing, or you don't know what you're saying. So these are some of the things that you have to look into. You have to look critically into to be able to ascertain um, uh, the chances of convincing your VO. So don't give inconsistent information. You are neither here nor here. You talk about this and then you talk about this. Your VOs are body language experts. They understand when there are inconsistencies in your argument. Remember, they are not looking whether you're saying the truth or whether you're saying lies, but they are there to validate, to check on the validity of your argument, to check on your inconsistency. You don't have to lie, but they are also there to follow on your ideological wavelength to make sure that you know exactly what you want and you know exactly how to represent yourself there. Then another one is unnecessary information. People make these mistakes. We are Nigerians, we like to talk too much. When we are asked one question, we want to explain. They don't need that explanation. Go straight to the point and just dump it there. When they ask you, where are you traveling to? Just say the name of your school and the location of your school. Don't go there, where are you traveling to? Then you start talking about, I'm going there for master's degree in this and this. And then after that, that is not the question. You are indirectly denying your VO the opportunity to ask questions because they have series of questions they want to ask you. So when you start leading the conversation, you digress. And that can be a red flag because the intention might be that you have something you're hiding and you're controlling the 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 dynamics of the conversation. This is not what you want in your interview. So the most important thing is slow it down. When they ask you a question, are you married? It's a yes or no answer. Don't say, I'm not married, but I have a boyfriend or I'm engaged. Or they ask you, are you married? Yes, I have a beautiful wife. They don't ask you that question. Those are unnecessary information. They ask you about your father. Who is sponsoring you? My father. Simple. Or my mother, or my brother, or my sister. Don't just go there and say my brother who is doing this, my father. There are occasions when you can use that, and I'll explain occasions that you can mention that. When they ask you about your parents, who is sponsoring you, there are occasions when you can answer and add. I'll mention that. But when they ask you about your father or who is sponsoring you, if it's your father, say my father. If it's your parents, say my parents. If it's your brother, say my brother. Then if you have, in Nigeria, we have two uncles. We have uncle and we have uncle. If it's your uncle, which is your dad's brother or your mom's brother, say my mom's brother instead of using uncle or uncle. Because in Nigeria, we generalize, everybody becomes an uncle. Everybody who is close to you becomes an uncle. And that is always sometimes it brings some kind of level of misconceptions. So avoid such a blanket statement. Go straight to the point. If it's your aunt, say my mom's sister, my mom's younger sister, my mom's elder sister. Go straight to the point. Don't try to blanket the conversation Don't try to make it look like my uncle. Then if it's your uncle, remember in Nigeria we have uncle and uncle. If it's your uncle, uncle can mean a lot of things. Uncle can mean anybody who is sponsoring you for gains. Uncle can mean anybody who wants to just give you money so that when you come to the US, you can refund back. Uncle can mean anybody. So be very careful. Be specific and direct in who is sponsoring about who is sponsoring you. Also, another scenario that can also come out could be when they ask you about your parents or who is sponsoring you. If that person who is sponsoring you has sponsored someone before, that is the moment when you say, "My uncle, he also sponsored my elder brother or my older sister in the US or in the UK or somewhere." So that's the moment to put on that line, because what your VOs are doing is to create a pattern of argument. So if someone who wants to sponsor you has sponsored someone, so the chances are higher that you, if you are given an opportunity, you can do the same. If you respected the visa, your visa status, and if the person respected the visa status and did all the necessary things, obeying the visa rules that you have to study and go back, they believe that if that person did the same, then you will do that. So it's always good that you use that pattern. So that is the only moment you can go beyond saying my uncle or my dad or my sister is my sponsor. He's also the one who sponsored my elder brother or my younger brother in the UK. So that is a point to add value to what you have. So it's always very important. If you have someone who has sponsored somebody, mention it at that moment. So it's always good to use that, because your VOs are building a pattern. Then, regarding what I'm talking about in terms of unnecessary information, some of the unnecessary information too could be when they ask you about why you chose a school and you start answering why you chose a course. Those are just unnecessary. When they ask you what you're doing, you start answering another thing. Those are unnecessary information. When they ask you about someone, you start blowing unnecessary trumpet. What they're asking are specific questions, and you have to answer and respond to those specific questions the way they want it. So, in other words, avoid unnecessary question. Any question that is not going to add to your point, please forget it. Forget it. And any questions, any answers you're going to give, make sure that those answers tally with your program and tally with what you want to do. Always give supportive answers, not answers that will be misleading to your case. Then another point to mention will be applying for the wrong visa. Sometimes you don't know, sometimes some people don't really understand what they want. So you want to go for school and then you apply for B1, B2. That's not really what you want, because even if you do that, if you travel to the US, you still have to come back to Nigeria to reapply to get back to the US. So why not just do it once? Okay, don't apply for the wrong visa. If you want to go to school, don't apply for the wrong visa. If you want to go to school, apply the ones and save that money. You don't just come there, because even if you apply for school, you still have to go to Nigeria and apply from your country for F1 visa. So you don't want to go through that, multifaceted route. Then another one is arguing with the consulate officer. You don't want to do that. You don't try that at all. When your VO engages you in conversation for more explanation, you start arguing. Don't do that. Please. Please don't do that. It's not allowed. Then another one will be lack of financial evidence. You don't have all the financial evidence to prove your case. You're just there, like just there. You know, you want to go to school and then you don't have any evidence. How do you think you're going to convince your VO? So you have to have a proof of financial evidence to take care of your interview. Another one is lying during the interview. That can attract automatic what is it called again? Ban. So some bans range from 5 years to 10 years to permanent. So be very careful when you engage in that kind of lies. So do not lie to your VO. That can be a problem for you. Then another one is missing deadlines. Be very careful. These are detailed things you need to do. And another one is not bringing all relevant documents, so which is also similar to, you know, having all the unnecessary incomplete documentation. So be careful with this. And if you have any questions at the end of this, please feel free to reach out to me for your options, okay, for your questions and answers. And also type it in the comment section. I'm here always to respond to you. So I wish you all the best as you plan this, as you plan for your interview. Please share this video, like, and subscribe. All right. Thank you and remain blessed.